Yeah. Next up, we have a very interesting panel discussion on an extremely important HR function, employment models and impact on industrial employee relations. Our first panelist is Mr. Santosh Nair, an HR leader with over 22 years of experience and expertise in various domains like employee relations, health and wellness, culture and values, ER compliance, resolution hubs, and talent assurance. He is currently working with Infosys Limited as an assistant vice president. Our next panelist, Mr. Raghuram, an alumni of TIS Mumbai, has a vast experience of over 26 years and is currently the head of transformation manufacturing of Shell Singapore, the largest equity refinery in the world. Previously, he was the HR director at Motorola. He has played an important role in setting up the Singapore chapter of NHRDN. We also have with us Mr. Prasanna Apte, who is currently working with Eaton Technologies as an head employee relations India and South Asia. He has a rich experience of over 25 years with organizations like JCB India, Ranbaxy Laboratories, Murugappa Group, and Finorix India. We're extremely thankful to all the panel members and are eagerly waiting for an enriching experience. Now, I would request the very dynamic and talented Aishwarya Anand, Senior Talent Acquisition Specialist with Zozo Day, who has completed her MBA from Ramaya Institute of Technology, to take forward the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sharada. That was a wonderful introduction to all of us.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. So we do have a great session lined up today, right? We have three prolific speakers with us who belong to different industries. So that is something which I look forward to having interaction with. Mr. Santosh Nair, of course, you are from the IT field and the industry of IT. That's something which most of us could relate of. And Mr. Prasanna, who's from the power management industry. And Mr. Raghuram, of course, you are, more towards the energy sector. So the interesting conversation that we're going to be having today is about the newer employment models that we're going to be having and the labor regulations that is associated with it. So to start off with, I think we have multiple things to talk about, especially in these changing times of the pandemic. Now that the whole work style has changed and the way people interact, the way people work, all of it has taken a drastic change in the last 2 years. So, with that, so what do you think? What do you kind of anticipate or observe in terms of the newer employment models that is happening in each of these industries? So, Mr. Santosh, would you want to start off first about talking about what is really going on in the IT sector?
Absolutely. Thanks, Chardat, and for the introduction, and Aishwarya for this wonderful question. See, if looking from an IT industry, overall, if you look at the employment model as well as the impact on employee relations or IR part, we need to understand where we were and the pandemic shift, what happened during the pandemic and what is likely to be in the future. So if you look at that, prior to the pandemic onset, we always used to have around 20%. I mean, some companies vary, but on average, if you look at IT industry, IT and IT enabled services industry, around 20% workforce used to work from home. So there were a technical model that was already available and it was being used. But why it was 20% is also because of a reason, because the workforce on this model handles a lot of confidential data and data security. That aspect comes into picture. So a set of people could only work from office. A few people could actually work from home as well. So that was the situation prior to pandemic. It was a flat world. The clients were all over the globe, and the workforce was servicing them from anywhere in the world. Once the pandemic has started, a couple of things was very important. One is organizations that was resilient had to move and quickly move to near 100% work from home, and most of the organizations were able to do that. The technological ability plus the government regulation support from employees actually wholehearted. So most of the IT companies moved near 100% work from home globally. Actually, that is what has happened. But one major thing during this shift, pandemic shift, has happened was that both the companies as well as clients realized that even in a 100% remote work situation, we can manage in terms of the confidentiality, in terms of data security, in terms of productivity, in terms of connecting people together. We can manage. Now, the question is whether we can manage for long term or not. That's a different one, but
Yes.
nothing majorly went away. So
Correct.
that was one learning the employers as well, the companies as well as clients learned. Now, what is in future?
Yeah.
The future is hybrid, that's for sure. I mean, I don't think we will ever go back to a situation of 100% people working from office simultaneously ever, at least for a few years. The
Yes.
future is hybrid with a few, majority of the people who may work for a few days in office, a few days at home. There will be a section of people who will work only from office. There will be a few section of people who work from home continuously as well. So that is going to be the hybrid model. Something more that has changed was the work models. So if you see more and more companies have now gig workers, have subcontracted staff. So the employee mix is going to change and is already changing. So how are you going to practice your employee relations practice in terms of culture and values, various other mechanism is going to be defined. So that is an overall view in terms of IT companies and IT enabled services companies and where we are actually going into the future.
So, what implications does this have on labor regulations and the employment models as such? So, what would be the dynamics associated with it?
Great. So, since the model of workforce, earlier majority of the workforce was regular employees. Now there will be gig workers, there will be contractors. Plus, because of the nature of the spread that has happened in the world, we have a huge aspect of diversity coming into place.
Yes,
Various nationalities, various age groups. Right now, we have almost 5 generation of workforce.
correct.
Different contracts you may have, like you may not have a regular employment contract. So some folks may work on contract for 2 3 companies together legitimately. So
Yeah.
how do you manage this workforce in various, the preferences of workforce will change. You also need to understand the engagement models as well, and then further comes to the ER aspect or IR aspect. You also have to redefine your engagement models to instill purpose at work, to retain the connect with the organizations. You need to instill culture and values to various groups of people. For example, if a person who is going to work with a company for say 3 weeks on a particular packet of job may not be that much interested in culture. So you need to understand what makes a difference for that workforce versus a permanent workforce. You also need to address a few things that is now coming into. For example, there could be issues of moonlighting. There could be issues of impersonation because of near 10% remote working. There could be impact on confidentiality. So what are the technical controls that you bring in? What are the people related controls, the HR practices, the IR practices? Various governments are now coming with some kind of changes, etc. So you need to redefine as we progress in the coming days when hybrid model evolves.
That's interesting to know, Mr. Santosh. So, Mr. Raghuram, would you want to add on to a few points that happens in the energy sector as such? So, how did this pandemic kind of impact the newer employment model?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. First of all, big thanks for NHRD to invite us. It's a wonderful platform. So I will talk about change and continuity. Though we come from, it's an old organization of 125 years old,
Yes.
Shell. We have a whole lot of workforce, which is a little bit like Mr. Nair's model, the IT model, and other is a hardcore manufacturing. So so let's take a step back and talk about three things which are going to really make a massive impact, uh, especially for our industry, which is the energy and the petrochemical, and even for the rest. The three thing was the speed of digital transformation or the whole transformation. It is almost 4x because of the whole thing which has happened because of COVID and other kind of things. Second, which has massively happened for us, and it touches everyone, is the whole transition. That is to sustainability, environmental issues, all of these which have come in, which has really impacted us. And actually, Shell, we had to reorganize and restructure ourselves while going through this. And the last one will be the whole focus on DEI. So these three things also impacted the present and the future. So spending a little bit time on how when the COVID happened for us. So one is because we were a 24 by 7 manufacturing refinery. For us, one of the biggest thing was how to ensure that people come to refinery without feel safe. Yeah. And for that, apart from the whole infrastructure and all, we also had to do a lot of role modeling and a lot of connect so people feel safe. And bit of what Mr. Nair talk about in future, I think so for us, there will be some force which will be permanent, which won't move. They'll have to come full time to workplace.
Yes.
And some will be hybrid. So that will also have an implications how this whole thing will change and how the transformation will happen for us.
It's wonderful to know. Mr. Prasanna, what about in the power management sector? So it's since it's an ITES industry, so what implications did this have at Eton?
Thanks, Aishwarya, for the question, as well as thanks, NHRDN, for inviting us for this wonderful discussion. Uh, as far as power management company, we have manufacturing as well as ITES. So this is a combination. When I say ITES, it is innovation center. These are shared services, IT center, sales and marketing centers, etc. So basically, manufacturing, yes, we definitely cannot do much in that because we have to run the factories and we have to follow the model, which is the industry practice. However, for ITES, uh, we have come up with certain forms of working, and those are nothing but flexible work systems. So when I say flexible work system, we have teleworking, we have flex time. When I say teleworking, it is you can work from any location and give the results. When I say flex working, there is no in time and out time, but whatever regulated timings are there, those are to be followed.
Okay.
We also have a remote work that you don't require to come to office. You work remotely. Where from you are working, we are not bothered. And finally, we have part-time uh, work scheme which we have opened. What we don't do as far as flexible work is concerned, we don't do freelancing, we don't do compressed week work, we don't do job sharing. So
Okay.
basically, we are future ready with this four types of FWS, that is flexible work systems. And we are looking forward to make it a big success, especially for our ITS sector,
Okay.
which is spread across India as well as all five South Asian countries.
Got it. All right. So, what do you think are the best practices that are in line with your respective industries with this newer employment models that has already been taking place? Do you think there is something else that you're anticipating that could be kind of implemented in the near future?
Yeah, in near future, basically, we are trying to go with this flex time as well as remote work, because this is very important in the interest of the employees also. At the same time, what was pointed out by Mr. Santosh Nair, especially certain checks and controls in terms of secrecy and privacy or the confidentiality.
Yes.
So those we are putting it. And the most important thing for Eaton is alignment with the regulations locally, because it is very important for Eaton and it is one of the most important ethical code of Eaton to obey the law. So we are aligning ourselves with the regulations, and of course, in other countries, regulations have come up, but in India also, let me tell you that different types of employees are now allowed. May not be allowed 100% by labor legislation. However, certain things are in pipeline. The best example is FTE, which is going to come. FTE means fixed term employee, which is going to come as a product of code on industry relations, which is in the pipeline. At the same time, diversity, inclusion, these are the important aspects when we are going ahead with this, because diverse workforce, diversity in terms of generation, in terms of gender, is very important for Eaton, and we are going ahead with that. Of course, regulation wise also, government is coming up with certain inclusion laws. So we are well prepared to see all that. And of course, the work is going to be hybrid. So all such things have to go parallelly, and good synchronization is required. So we have already started our work on that.
Got it. All right. So now, now that we've established that this hybrid model is good to stay, at least for a significant period of time, right? So, what do you think, or how can the grievances as such with the employees have, or these issues that we are facing now in terms of moonlighting or impersonation, or privacy of the information that we have, confidentiality of the information that we have? So, how are these grievances that are going to be addressed? Because let's face it, the laws have not changed. It's only the circumstances which have. So, how do you think that can be tackled? Mr. Santosh, would you want to take from your point of view?
Yeah, sure, sure. It's a good question. And let me answer that in two parts. So, split the grievances separate, the moonlighting or the confidentiality part or the impersonation part separate. Because grievances originates because of different reason. And these issues that I mentioned originated because of the remote working aspects. Now, on the aspects of moonlighting, on the aspect of impersonation, confidentiality issues, while the extent of it varies between country to country, certain countries it is less, certain
Yeah.
countries it is more, you need to bring in technology to a great extent to address this because the scale is so high that if you try to do manually, it may not be successful. For example, impersonation. Say there are people who are appearing for interviews, multiple interviews, joining somebody else is joining, but most of the companies have certain technological mechanisms by which interview happens remote. Whether it is business interview, HR interview, and then people join on a remote model. Um, there are solutions developed by certain organizations now, including Infosys, that is being used in some part of the world, where you could scan through, depending upon the regulations in a country, the faces, using the face recognition and other things to see whether the person is the same or not. So you should bring in technology. There are also some organizations working on how to prevent moonlighting because moonlighting is very difficult to detect.
Yes.
Unless otherwise the manager of a person is fully into it. Sometimes it may not be because of the nature of the work. But there are methods. For example, in India, you could see whether provident fund is being paid from multiple organizations, income tax. So to the extent that you can actually examine. So there are ways and methods up to which, if not 100% to an extent, you can examine this kind of things. Confidentiality is definitely, it depends upon the kind of controls that you want to bring in, and it's already in place. You may need enhancement. So essentially, on the aspect of moonlighting, confidentiality, as well as impersonation, bring in technology changes your process so that you can identify it as much as possible. That is one. On the grievances part, see the origin. You have to see what is the issue. Are we likely to see more and more grievances? Maybe to some area.
Okay.
Why? Because of basically the lack of connect. So, why do you have grievances? That is because your work atmosphere is not as conducive as earlier. And why does
Yes.
it happen? It's because of social connect, lack of social connect. Within a team also, if the connect is lesser, either between colleagues or between manager and colleagues is when grievances start occurring. So the first thing that you need to do is that what are you going to do in instilling culture and values? And it's very easy to talk theoretically that you do a session, you send some communication. It doesn't work like that. You need to have practically impart methods for culture and values. You have to start from the new joins. There are people who have joined company and without even seeing office, they have left. Probably without even meeting all colleagues, they have left. So how do you address the new joins? That's where the hybrid model with sufficient social connect is going to help. You need to enable your managers in terms of newer methods to actually bring in social connect. It may not be in office. So there are organizations that is actually having small meetings outside somewhere. So bring in as much as inter-team connects or intra-team connects to bring in social connect, which will help you in terms of culture and values. That will bring down the grievances part. In terms of handling grievances, I think enablement, that is the best medicine for it. Enabling right from employees up to managers and have mechanisms. So corrective mechanism, most of the established companies do have corrective mechanism. That means if you have a grievance, how to address it right from the beginning. Or I don't think anybody has got any issue with respect to corrective mechanism. I think where we need to spend more time is on preventive mechanisms.
Absolutely.
Use analytics, use behavioral sciences. So you have a lot of data. I mean, the right way you can analyze the data, apply behavioral sciences to see where which pocket the issue is likely to come in. For example, if you're going to have 10% of gig workforce, and from which sort of background this workforce is going to come in, you try to forecast what are the kind of issues that you may face, and then prevent it by kind of interventions.
Okay. Okay. What
Just
about?
give a point.
Yes.
Sorry, just coming there. Can we turn this upside down? we have been always looking things in a very traditional manner. Building on what Mr. Nair said, I think so. We need to little bit go talk about. We have been trying to work on a concept called psychological safety and bit of trust. Can we start trusting employees more? Because I think so. This whole pandemic has really shown the whole trust equation has changed dramatically. So if you give that safety, if you give that, can you have a trust where employees can walk up and say, "Hey, either I see a grievance, some issue happening, or I feel safe to talk about it." Yeah. So just building on a bit of what Mr. Nair said is that it's also let's turn this upside down and look at it in a bit of a disruptive way rather than looking at it in a traditional way, because last 2 years have really disrupted everything. Yeah, and let's look at building on trust and saying you'll have grievance. If you have grievance, first learn to speak up, or intervene, or really talk about how do you own it from your own team. Yeah. Grievance also has become very individual. Rather.
Mr. Raghuram, I'm adding on to what you're saying when you're talking about speaking up in terms of, any grievances that you have. But sometimes that gets blown out of proportion, don't you think? Because now that everyone has easy access to internet, you just have to go on Twitter or on LinkedIn and just keep ranting about a lot of things. It might go viral. And sometimes it could be a very trivial issue or something which that can be sorted out within the team itself gets blown out of proportion. So how do you think that can be managed? Some sense of a discipline in the system, or maybe setting up a process in the system. How do we kind of establish the boundaries on what can be dealt with certain dignity and confidentiality, and what need not? You need not go on a ranting spree maybe for something very very silly or small. So how can we kind of deal with that scenario?
Absolutely. We have been, first of all, the ranting is not new. In some form, some shape, it is always coming. And they
Yes.
will always be there. And even social media, all of this in some form, it's been there for many years. It's not there. It's not something, and you have various forums, and not just social media, various forums to people to talk about it. Goes back to, I think so, one of the person has said even on the chat, goes back to the fundamentals that we have to work on, and what was the whole values things. If your basic values and fundamentals and bit of the leaders are fine, and you have the right forums, this will keep coming, right? Just to give you an example, we had a very unfortunate incident in Singapore with Shell, where there was a theft of millions of dollars by some of the employees whom we trusted, because they worked with the shipping company and worked with the oil and all of this stuff. And now this led to ranting, this led to a whole lot of things. But
Yeah.
when you have the basic values, principles on set, there were also equal set of people who really came back and who equally said that, yeah, this exists, but we need to carry on. So I think as long as your messaging is there, as long as your values are there, as long as, like somebody said, you're listening and you have right leaders, I think you'll be able to manage it. And the fact is, you'll have to really know what is the real ranting and what is a magnified ranting. And if real ranting is there, like Mr. Nair said, there may be an issue we need to fix, and we're not listening well.
Well, that's a wonderful way to put it. Again, but values and culture are very subjective terms. It could be interpreted in multiple ways. So that's a very interesting take that you have about these rantings and grievances that's just getting blown out of proportion on social media. Mr. Prasanna, what do you have to say about this? What are your thoughts about it?
Yes, see, basically, culture and engagement, these two are important aspects. It is absolutely fine that culture is subjective, but how is our value system? This is very important. If your value system is very strong, and if you properly impart the training thereon to your employees, then we can minimize the grievances, we can minimize the matters getting blown out of proportion. Another important aspect of this is how do you do the new employee orientation, and how do you give the flavor of the organization to them. What Santosh ji told just now, and it is absolutely fine. Even Eaton also faced that people never saw the company. They just joined. They worked for 1.5 years and they left. At the same time, there were certain grievances. They cited certain grievances. How fast do we overcome those grievances and how fast we eliminate those, that is also very important. And lastly comes employee, uh, trusting your employees. How much do you trust on your employees? Of course, its is facing a problem of moonlighting. However, moonlighting is also controlled by various systems.
Yeah,
Factories, let us not talk about, because Factories Act is very clear in India. As per Section 60, dual employment is not possible. Nowadays, voucher payments are scrapped. So somehow that is a good thing for us, where we can control this moonlighting. Of course, PF has come up with UN number, and such type of cases were detected in the past. So some sort of control we are keeping, but at the nutshell, if you ask me, culture and engagement, how strongly you implement that and how strongly you build that before implementation, and how are you in building the trust among the employees, and how do you trust your employees? So this is the entire gaming. That's all from my side on this.
yeah, Mr. Santosh, would you want to add on a few points on this regard?
Yeah, so I would like to highlight a couple of things on the social media world. So if you see, especially companies with younger workforce,
Yeah,
your maximum workforce is the new generation, the Gen Z or the Gen network. They are born with a network. I
correct.
mean, if you see, their entire psychology is being connected. Now, social media is part of their life. Now, uh, if you also have to see the social media part in two angles. One is expression, the free speech. I mean, that you need to give it to them. And the other side, how far you can go and what is the limit. So I think companies needs to take a right balance of it. You should allow internal networks also for folks so that people approaching external networks are less. So what I mean is internal network, which is as easy as a social media for people to actually express their views, not only complaints, express their views so that some of it is addressed internally. And then have your internal policies or guidelines that limits up to what extent you can actually make certain statements against categories of people or whatever conditions that you want to keep it, and try to regulate it in terms of monitoring. So have a balanced act in terms of social media because it can also help you. A strong social media in through internal network or external, you can also get the pulse of the people, which you can use the right way. There are organizations that use social media to a great advantage for engagement, for connecting people. So there are many companies use Instagram for various matters,
Yes.
for the right reason. So I think we need to use it in the right manner, put control so that things don't go that bad if some people goes beyond limit, and have policies and guidelines to address such kind of deviations as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it. All right. So now, in terms of labor regulations as such, so let's say in terms of an organization strike or legality or the unions of the past, and what do you think the unions of the future that is going to be looking like now that we've established for this kind of a setup, the hybrid model that is kind of emerging and being on the trend. So how do you think these unions are going to play out as such?
So, if I may take that question, I think,
Sure.
of course, in IT-enabled industry, the established unions are less. But in my view, unions are going to be more powerful in a hybrid world, just because the reach is higher. Earlier, of course, you need to
Yeah.
be physically present for some influence. Now you can influence socially as well. Look at right now, nowadays, if there's an issue, it is known to the world much faster than compared to how a union used to behave in the past. So probably we can take it in a way that unions are more powerful rather than actually addressing issues. You take measures so that there are no issues that really needs to be taken into that level, and you address people. So that's how I think you need to approach rather than looking at the adverse side of it. Take measures so that things don't go that bad.
Yeah. If I can say two things. One, even the earlier part, what Mr. Santosh was talking about, the control and the the boundaries. I think we need to be a little bit careful. Uh, I feel the word control or creating the boundaries restricts people. We should have it somewhere behind our mind. But if you create a psychologically safe space, people will speak up, and the community itself comes together and makes it happen. That's one. Second, I feel Unions are also transforming. I maybe it's more, and we are hearing it more in Europe and US and here. They're talking a lot of capabilities. Capabilities has become a big conversational point, and future-ready workforce has become a future big conversation point for the union, and the whole union awareness, their own understanding of the stuff of what's happening is much more. So if those things are going to happen more, the way we deal with unions is, apart from the usual collective bargaining and all this stuff, is also going to be very different. And the way we can partner with them will also be very different. I don't know how much of the growth, I was looking at a bit of statistics. The way the unions are the most are in government organizations and public sector organizations, banks, they're going to probably become more powerful, 30-40%. Globally, in the rest of the places, there's actually a decline. You have one Starbucks store in US getting unionized, or one Amazon center is
Yeah.
getting unionized. In the larger scheme of things, it is going to be very small. And the younger workforce doesn't really bother because they're relatively well paid and their economic background is very strong. It's only like, if you, like Mr. Nair said, the grievances don't get addressed, if the issues don't get addressed, then you give an opening. Otherwise, my view is the discussion will change, and maybe they may even get same or may even get a little weaker in the private sector.
Got it. But again, the pendulum in the industry is kind of swinging between the two ends of the spectrum in terms of protectionism, be it from the employee's end or from the employer's end, where each one is trying to safeguard their intentions of whatever grievances they have or whatever they have to kind of put forth out there. And at the same time, it is going to be a protectionism from the employer's end, where they are going to try to safeguard their brand value, their sense of culture and image in the industry. So how do you think that's going to pan out? What do you anticipate in those lines? Mr. Prasanna, would you want to add on to it?
Yeah. See, basically, the overall the scenario, if we see first, I take the shelter of the earlier point, and that was pertaining to unionism and the future. Unions are coming with certain good mindset, which is digitally enabled, and overall, if we see, uh, overall engagement wise also, we absolutely need to see that how we respond to the people, that is important aspect in this. uh, I would like to get a question again once.
You would
Hello.
like the question to be re-articulated, Ashwin.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So, Mr. Prasanna, as I was saying that, there is a sense of protectionism from the employee's end as well as the employer's end, especially when in terms of addressing the grievances. Everybody just wants to safeguard their intentions, right? So, especially in the newer model where the technology is predominant, how is that going to pan out?
Yeah, basically, the environment is going to be the result oriented. Definitely policies or policing around the employees, as pointed out by
Yeah.
Mr. Raghu, will go away. Employee trust is going to be the important aspect in this. We have to trust our people that they are doing right, and as per the values and customs and philosophy of the organization. Coming to protectionism, yes, definitely the most important protection is job protection. And for job protection, everybody doesn't go to the union, or they immediately do not
Yes.
form the union. Grievances are burning under the carpet, and they come up as a dispute on one fine day, and then it ignites the unionism, or organizing the employees uh, overall. Managements are taking care of this by trusting the employees, especially Eaton management is trusting its employees. We have been training our HR folks that how to deal with the employees in the given scenario. When we are coming up with FWS, that is flexible work systems, our HR managers should be more responsive than reactive. And this is the way we will make the employees to feel safe. Again, the mental safety plays very important role in this, because well-being, every company is doing well-being. How many companies are
Okay.
doing well-being for mentality of people or mental well-being? How many companies are following? This is very important. This is a good word that companies can make presentations upon, but how many of them are following, and how many are removing the fear of this particular protectionism out of the minds of employees? This is important. At the same time, to protect our interest, what companies are doing, companies are just, they just have to do one thing, which is very simple, that they have to be future ready, and they have to anticipate that what problems employees can face. So that is what is my submission here.
That's a wonderful way to put it. React, respond, not react, right? I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
something which all of us can, implement and do it. That's a wonderful way to put it across. So yeah, so in also to ensure I was also going through certain questions that was posed from the audience as well. So I would also want to know more about the unions. What should they do in order to adapt and to be relevant? Because like you said, not everybody is going to be addressing their grievances by taking it to the unions or ensuring that any kind of new policies or any procedure that has to be implemented from the union only. So in order to stay relevant, especially in this new Gen X generation, how do you think we can do that, or how to be more relevant and to adapt to the changing circumstances?
You're asking how unions will be relevant, or
Yes.
what are they doing, right?
Shall I?
What are they doing to not be relevant? Yes, please.
Uh, Okay, basically, what we can see in the current era, especially in India and ITES industry, these unions are not coming up with traditional purposes. These unions are coming up with certain protection to the employees. This is main agenda. Everywhere, offices are lavish offices. Offices are really uh, fantastic places to work at. So, workplace is not an issue. Earlier, if we see the conservative approach that were, these are the working conditions and how people can work, now that all has gone. What is important at this point of time, that there shouldn't be harassment. When we say harassment, again we come to the broader term, that how do people feel themselves safe mentally. So unions are basically fighting for this. Unions are fighting for, in their language, unlawful terminations. In American parlance or in international parlance, we call it layoff. In India, we call it retrenchment. So, how to
Yeah.
overcome on that, and how to protect the interest of the employees in terms of continuity of the job. So, this is one aspect. And unions are coming up, or whatever unions have come up, they have come up with this particular thought process. If you see, in 2015, the first case lodged in uh, labor court of Chennai, and then we got the judgment that was of HCL, that even the programmers, they are falling in the category which is protected by law. So basically, this was against unlawful terminations. And just to give a protection, now union has this particular agenda. This is definitely not going to lead collective bargaining agreement, etc., in near future at least. But protectionism will be the main agenda of the unions, at the same time, well-being of their employees, both mentally and physically.
That's wonderful. All right. So I think we did have a detailed, elaborate discussion on these labor regulations and the newer employment models. So I think in order to conclude, I think although the three of you belong to the different industries, more or less, the issues remain the same. It's the concerns remain the same, and irrespective of whichever domains that we belong to in the HR field, I think they're all interconnected, right? So whatever happens in each of these domains, it is going to be having its ripple effects on the rest. So it's a wonderful insights that the three of you had to give and to make this session more interesting. So thank you for that. So I think we do have a couple of more minutes left. I can take a couple of questions from the audience if you can address them. Um, all right, so we do have a question from Mr. Sanitra. What's your take on removing unions? Supervisors would work well towards the better and direct healthy connection between top management and employees. What do you think? Do you think that's going to be a relevant solution for it by just removing the unions as it is?
I don't think so. We can remove the unions.
Yeah, because it is. I
In
don't think there is anybody who is making the unions. Also, there is no question of removing it.
Yeah.
But I think
yeah,
if you don't want unions, it should be take measures in such a way that there is no need for a union rather than removing the union. So take steps, employers should take steps in such a way that people are well satisfied. It's a win-win and they don't feel the need for it rather than removing the union. Concept wise, yes, what you're telling, absence of union, but removal of union may not be practical.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes,
So I worked in two companies, one in Motorola and one in Shell. Motorola, we believe no union at all. Yeah. If there's a union going to get formed, the VP or GM and the HR guy will get sacked. The reason was simple because you failed in a job to provide, like what Mr. Prasanna was saying, that you push things under the carpet and then you blew it off. So we used to have a
correct.
philosophy called direct dealing. So there were no unions in Motorola. We had huge factories which were making, and in the good old days, if I can say. Coming to Shell, I'm more with what Mr. Santosh said, that you cannot remove, but you need to adapt and you need to change the thing. Yep. And unions are getting more smarter than ever, yeah, which
Yes.
yeah,
can be positive also. Yeah.
yeah. My add-on for Sunetra is only one thing: we can definitely make unions dormant. So we cannot remove them because they are coming up with their constitutional right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
So in India, at least we cannot remove them, but definitely we can make them dormant. Let us let us see that how our people are working and they are aligned with us. That is important. How do we respond to our employees and don't react? That is the tagline. So if we follow
Yes,
that,
I
I
think
don't
that
think
should be the tagline.
unions will be there.
Okay. Okay.
So
And
it
also,
depends
I
upon
think,
sorry, it also depends upon the country and industry.
Yeah.
There are very
Absolutely.
good examples of in certain part of the world how unions are actually working well with employer for collective benefit, both employer and employees, both forward-looking, future-looking unions. That will happen provided you meet the basic criteria very well, so that they don't get into or waste their time in trying to collective bargain for what they are right. But once you meet that, the basic rights, unions can be quite productive by bringing in ideas, working towards future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
Employee councils also play very important role for keeping unions away. If employee councils work in a proper manner and effective manner, unions will definitely not come. And even if they come, they have to be dormant permanently.
Yeah.
And of course, employee councils should be there.
okay. And also, I think there is a question specifically concerned to the energy sector. So, in the energy sector, in the long term, say after 3, 4 years, will the hybrid model would be there, or we should be getting back as before? So, what do you think?
Oh, the hybrid model will definitely be there. Yeah. Yeah. But
I think that's good to see.
yeah, the manufacturing will go through a dramatic shift. So if you have a refinery, you don't need to manage refinery by being in the refinery. You can work outside, which we're already doing in upstream in some of the places in US and all. So that model will change, where the person doesn't need to come to actual place, and
Okay.
because of the whole digital transformation, yeah, because of the whole changes happening. But the fact is, they will be coming to the work. The fact is that the hybrid model will continue in the energy sector. And the other one is energy sector, because of the huge energy transition and environment and sustainability and all of these things coming up. That can also make a huge difference in the way the workforce will be. Now, we have people, I think so, I don't know how much your other guys have. I know Mr. Prasanna can relate that to me a lot, where people who work 50 years in Shell, in one location, in one refinery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of things will probably change a lot. But the fact is, we will have to, some workforce has to come to work.
Yeah.
Cannot be 100% hybrid in a manufacturing.
Okay. We also have another very interesting question. The great resignation has disturbed all the employment models, especially in the IT sector. Nothing really guarantees attraction or retention. What is your take? So, I think Mr. Santosh would be the right person to answer. And also, being from the TA team, talent acquisition team, I can vouch for this. So, Mr. Santosh, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, there are. It's a fact that there is a great resignation. It's a fact that there is a lot of churnout that happening in many industries, and IT industry is one of the place where it is at the intensity. Now, the reasons, there are various theories of it. One of the theories that it is simply supply and demand equation. In the sense, because of the pandemic, as well as other reasons, there have been huge demand for technology. Every company is a technology company now. I mean, unless otherwise you have a
Yes.
technology division, you can't really survive. So there's a huge
Correct.
demand, and the number of millions of jobs available versus the candidate is less. Of course, therefore, it's a supply and demand, and you need to get more people coming into it. That is one theory. So if you see most of the IT companies, they are hiring a lot of freshers, training in. So it
Yeah.
will take some years for us to equate the supply and demand part. Second is the inequality in terms of compensation is another theory that comes in. Like, is it that at the junior levels the compensation is not really there, or the company needs to increase that? So there are various companies working on that side. In my view, a mixed approach of building new resources, addressing the issues of compensation or other benefits as well as instilling a sense of purpose for people to stay. So look at, in a hybrid model or completely remote model, you're not connected to the company,
Correct.
and people leave in few months actually. So instill a social connect part, build more talent at the lower part of the pyramid, as well as actually newer technologies that will reduce the number of intensive manpower should address this in a few years, is what I think. But it is there here to stay for some more time.
It's the cycle of life.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. All right. So yeah, I think that was a wonderful session. Thank you so much. We've had really interesting questions coming up, but unfortunately, just due to the constraint of time, we're just going ahead with just these ones for now. All right. So thank you, Charudat. I see you've also been there for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
So thanks.
So yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. It was really a pleasure and honor to have you at the national conference. The ideas and the insights that you have given are really very helpful to all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.